Hello and welcome to the YouTube channel. Today, what we're talking about is our day one executive orders. The first one is going to be statewide non-discrimination. That's actually going to upgrade a bill that was put into law in 2002 and extend to statewide services and employment and other activities. We will then be working with the legislative group to create a bill that extends to private housing and employment and those kinds of opportunities. That's why we say the first 30 days. So the day one are the executive orders, and then the first 30 days is working with the legislature. Some of the bills that I want to see from them right away is, of course, 78 regarding the pensions for Alaskan public servants. When I saw that that was vetoed, I texted AFL-CIO Joe L. Hall, and I was like, I want to see that on my desk immediately, as soon as I'm governor. Um, it's really a challenge because our public servants right now, they don't receive a pension. And because they are public servants and they're in a different class that generally receives pensions, they're actually excluded from applying for Social Security. So that means in our state, if you've worked as a public servant, that when it comes to age of retirement, many of those people are going to be destitute and in abject poverty. And that's not okay. We need to make sure that we're supporting our state workers who are providing services and keeping our state running. Something else that we need to work on is we talked about the bifurcation of our commission on fish and wildlife. And that's something that the governor can do is a reorganization of the commissioner's office. And so we want to bring somebody who is specifically focused on fish, and we also want to have somebody who's focused on game. We have an issue with both of them are declining, and we have fish politics are like the most complex politics in the state of Alaska. We need people who understand science and data and best practices and who can actually make good choices and work with subsistence and sports and commercial to make sure that we have our priorities straight and that we're supporting the whole life cycle of the fish, from spawning to fry to traveling in the rivers and out to the oceans and then back again. Looking at how can we best support them and make sure that we have a management for sustained yield and even beyond sustained yields. Traditionally we actually have values um, in our traditional ecological knowledge that we help to increase and augment abundance so that there's enough for people, enough for regeneration, enough for the bears, the wildlife, um, but also enough to trade and share and give out in the communities. Another item that we're going to put into place on day one is an AI governance board. We have to have the people who are familiar with the technology, the laws and policies or lack thereof, and have them put in place so that we can start to work on creating policies around big AI data centers, our privacy and freedom, and several other aspects of our lives that are going to be touched by AI and big data. The next thing that will go in on day one is our allocation of school funding. So we have the Alaska Reads Act. We want to make sure that regional school districts have a say in how that is applied and the oversight. We have Juneau right now who hands down edicts to schools, and what works in Juneau doesn't always work in the community. So we want to diversify and share that power with the local school districts, as well as increasing the BSA and allotment that are going out to the students. Currently we have a BSA that hasn't even kept up with inflation. And then beyond that, we're actually going to look at implementing a working group to look at how we can do education better across the state. And there's been people who've dedicated their lives and efforts to understanding the issues around education, who have been advising this current administration, but the current administration hasn't been listening. So we'll engage those folks who've done all that work and actually look at what's the data behind the best practices and start to implement those as we go forward. And again, some of these can be done in executive orders, and some of them will be done with the legislative group. Another one is the Vic Fisher bill. There's a bill to honor Vic Fisher and name a marine sanctuary after him, as well as the UAA Department of Research on Social Issues. And I'd like to see that come through. Vic Fisher was an important mentor in my life. He was the APOC chair for the recall Dunleavy movement while I was the statewide chair and statewide organizer for the recall movement. We were able to work together closely on that. And he's actually somebody who wanted me to run for governor, get into politics. Last time I saw him, he asked me if I was ready to run yet. And I said, no, not yet. My kids aren't old enough yet. And, they're not ready. And he said, okay, wise woman, but he also wanted me to run as soon as I felt they're ready. And now, they are. They're not only are they self-sufficient, but they're really helpful and they're good at doing chores and they want me to run